However you are and whenever you are, welcome good souls to Paranormal Now. I'm Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. Joining me tonight is returning champion Dr. Robert Davis. He's one of my favorites, and our conversations always go in unexpected places. But tonight we will be exploring consciousness and the connection between what some might call ET, sentient beings, the paranormal, and Dr. Bob Davis is going to take us on a journey in this next hour. So hang in there, because you're going to need your thinking caps and your wetsuit to go in the deep dive of this metaphysical journey with us here tonight with Dr. Bob. As always, if you are a fan of coffee as much as I am, you can always use the Alien Coffee Bean discount on their website for 20% off. If you are in the US, that is mystery all caps 20 for 20% discount. Just enter that code in at aliencoffeebean.com. All right, so we're not going to do the open lines tonight. We're not going to have a second hour. Tonight is one of those rare nights where it's just 1 hour. We're going to hang out with our guest, and I'll be here with you. If you have questions in the chat, I'm going to do my best to get them, bring them on, and we'll get Bob's response. Please follow on Instagram at Paranormal Now. And of course, here on this channel, if you appreciate our guests and the shows that we put on Paranormal Pop, please subscribe, comment down below, like and share. Little by little, the numbers are going up, and I really appreciate all of you who have recently subscribed and are sharing and have followed the show over the years as well. So all of you are really important to building this platform. And of course, if you missed tonight, you can catch it on KUNXDB, the unxnetwork.com at 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, let's bring on one of my favorite guests, a really smart guy, Dr. Bob Davis. Bob, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing okay, Alan. Just tired, but listen, it's an absolute pleasure being on with you again. So I think something like our fourth interview over the last several years, and you're really in the top echelon of my book as an interviewer, podcast, and human being. It's an absolute pleasure. Always willing to be with you, pal.
Thank you. You know, sometimes you just have guests that you have to have back, and I enjoy our conversations, not just on air, but off the air as well, because I know that your heart is in the right place as far as trying to understand the enigma of what I guess what you could call the nature of reality is. And so, let me just quickly read your bio for those who are maybe less familiar with you. So Dr. Robert Davis is an internationally recognized research scientist and author. And after receiving his doctorate degree in 1981, he conducted research, taught, and was an administrator at the State University of New York for over 30 years. Bob has spoken about his research on the effects of environmental and toxic stimuli on the brain and sensory systems in venues that vary from national and international scientific conferences to over 60 published researched articles in scholarly journals. He's been busy. Since his retirement, he has spoken on over 100 national and international radio shows and podcasts, and his recent research publications on the science of the subjective and human consciousness. So, Bob, a question that I don't think I've asked you before, and it is your line of thinking and your research. Is that a path towards actually understanding the very nature of reality? Is it an alternative way to go versus science or esoteric meditation?
Yeah, it's a left brain, right brain struggle. It's maybe we're born with that innate capacity to be truth seekers. There are some people that look for that God, spiritual neuron in the brain. Maybe we all have those questions, maybe a little more than others for some reason, especially those that experience an alternate reality or what we call the paranormal. It's tomorrow's quantum mechanics, right? You'll have to change the name. You have to change the name of your show. But
Yeah.
uh, um, so it becomes more complex the more you study it.
Hmm.
The physical aspects to it, non-physical aspects to it, and it's an internal struggle that we all share.
Sure.
Most people, I don't think, can handle it and ignore it, suppress it. Maybe we're all aware of it, but it's suppressed for some reason. But then the cork comes out of the bottle when something we can't understand happens that we can't explain. In the form of UFO, NDE, OBE. We know this story. Our peak
Hmm.
experiences, for lack of a better term, that overarching
Well,
concept.
what excites you the most about it? I mean, studying all these various aspects of high strangeness.
Um, the left brain being satisfied by the non-physical, the subjective, anecdotal. That's what Newtonian physics struggles with. How do you quantify the anecdotal subjective experience? They don't take. It's all nuts and bolts, and anything else is woo. So it's not can't be real when people talk about communicating with beings, interacting with the supreme beings or relatives,
Hmm.
deceased. That is, we all know the stories. So the only way to do that is to document cases where somebody has a near-death experience, like an Eben Alexander, who's mentioned this on numerous venues. He meets a woman who tells him that she had died before he was born.
Hmm.
She was his sister. She shared with him her name and other factual information about the family that he could apparently not have obtained otherwise. When he
Hmm.
recovers miraculously, given less than 1% chance due to bacterial meningitis in his brain, which he regarded as a greater miracle than anything else that he survived and coherent afterwards. The parents verified exactly what the supposedly deceased sister told him. Those kinds of cases with that veridical perception and beyond, where you get confirmation, that information exchange that's very accurate, that difficult to ignore. It's not just beyond channeling.
Hmm.
It's verification of a second, third order. That's rare in occurrence, but it happens like a sheer death experience. If you time it like a synchronicity at the low end of the scale of complexity, timing a meaning existing simultaneously, let alone other forms of paranormal events that get my attention, especially those where that
Hmm.
information exchange is accurate and valid.
What is channeling?
Uh, the different types: physical mediumship, mental mediumship. I was
Hmm.
just listening to a podcast with John Climo, an old friend of mine. He wrote the book on channeling. The different techniques, he called it open channeling, just letting yourself go and
Yeah.
asking the ether, in his words, to use you as a vessel and to communicate, through you. Many people claim to do this. I wouldn't pay
Yeah.
any money to anybody to do it for me on any street corner shop,
Well,
but there are some legitimate cases.
yeah, yeah.
There are.
Well, I
Uh,
had a guest on recently, April Busset, Bob, and she read live on the air, and it seemed to defy probability um, by tenfold. I mean, it was just unbelievably accurate. I couldn't believe it, how quick she was to read certain things about my life and the listeners' lives as well. Have you had an experience
mm,
with a psychic medium yourself where you thought, whoa, um, they might have
I
something?
have, I have, but not in that way. But
Okay.
with an aspect of something we consider again to be a phenomena that we can't explain, where
Hmm.
some energy was channeled or directed to me,
Yeah.
not in verbal terms, language
Hmm.
terms, but in terms of opening me up.
Hmm.
Called it a Kundalini-like event that
Kundalini.
was
Okay.
channeled by this woman. Fantastic experience, marvelous, and the spiritual emergency for a period of time thereafter. Why me? What happened? Or what do I do? Who do I talk
Well,
to? You know,
yeah, yeah.
all that. So Stanislav Graf's book Spiritual Immersion became a very useful text, and I recommend people read that who are going through a spiritual emergency, especially if you have whatever, anything that knocks your socks off that you can't explain and you can't get your mind off it. And it's easy for people to become obsessed with it in varying ways, depending upon what it is, depending upon the person's own personality and sensitivities, and the level of anxiety it induces. It can be overwhelming in many, many cases. But people remain in the closet, and I did for a long time until I saw two orange orbs, and then I had a shared death experience, and then I had a Kundalini experience. Yeah, I'm
Mm-hmm.
tired of people don't like that. When it's stigmatized and all that. Let them. That veil is lifting. We need it. Part of the transformation to that paradigm shift we all need.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the forefront talking about this, more than anybody else. The select few of you, you get at it. There's a lot of nonsense and sense, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
science has to play catch up
Yeah.
to what people are experiencing because we can't explain it.
Well, why did you ask why me when you were having that experience?
Good question. I think it's a fairly common question that people ask, like when they have a near-death experience or
Mm-hmm.
any of these unusual experiences. Why was I given this opportunity to see an alternate realm?
Yeah.
Why am I struggling with these different philosophical views now?
Mm-hmm.
Money's not important. Organized religion's not important.
Right.
The person I married is very different. I want a divorce. I'm different. Not
Yeah.
me personally. I'm just saying that people are transformed. It's a transpersonal reaction they have to the point where their inner being is actually affected, significantly so that they alter many of their routine daily life habits, belief systems, personal viewpoints, etc. Um, Even their beliefs in God. I mean, anything so profound that affects your belief system in that
Mm-hmm.
way, let alone whether or not you should remain married. It's unfortunately much more common. These divorces are 70% in those who have an NDE within 7 years following the NDE, versus 40-50% in the average population. Very high to
Mm-hmm.
begin with, NDE or not.
So,
Point is, it emphasizes something. You quantify something to the left brain people. People have changed. And the question is why? Peak
right.
experience.
And Enigma has a song, and it starts off with, "I'm asking why," and it's just, "I'm asking why."
Nah,
Like that's the chorus, right? And it's like
yeah.
we just look up. And what who are we talking to? What are we looking out to? Why
Yeah.
do we think there's anyone even listening?
Um, because we're listening to ourselves, if anything, if nobody else is listening, and you wonder about that. Seriously, sometimes you have to hear your own thoughts and you discuss it with your higher self and go with
Mm-hmm.
you communicate with yourself. That gut feeling, for instance, it's
Yeah.
like a feedback mechanism. How many times do we say, wish I followed that gut feeling, that initial reaction? It wasn't a thought. I didn't rationalize it, kicking it around for 3 days with anxiety and depression and all that stuff, and came to a decision. No, I should have went my gut feeling. The first thing that I reacted to, I ignored it. We learned the hard way. Oftentimes that is right, not always, but oftentimes it is. Don't ignore it. Is what I'm saying. And you have the hindsight behind many decades of living to know that it's a more valuable piece
Mm-hmm.
of biologic information that you shouldn't ignore. Likewise, we get this communication system from within. We get it in our minds as well.
Yeah.
Subconscious versus conscious. That we know there's two different aspects of mental functioning. Um, Maybe we suppress a lot of the, I don't know, I don't want to go into so many different arenas like dreams and channeling states and other things that ascribe to the subconscious mind, playing more of a role than we
What
think it does. Um,
is it possible that we're actually communicating to another? sentient being, because we're asked those big questions, and then we hear stories about people who are having alien abductions, and those questions seem to be answered at least to some degree. So
Well, that's
when
true.
and you say that when we're asking that question, that we're kind of asking ourselves, which begs the question: are those extraterrestrials or whatever kind of a shadow of us or some other aspect of our consciousness?
Well, that's a good way of putting it. I think it could be confusing to some people. It may be yourself,
Mm-hmm.
your higher self, but some people may consider it, however, an alien being, unless they actually see a gray or see a reptilian, which people claim to do.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but that could be confusing a little bit. Some people are more fantasy prone, more suspect for imaginary thinking, of course. But that's not true in all cases. Very well balanced people, millions worldwide throughout time, are
Mm-hmm.
interacting with something far greater and different than 3D reality, expressed in varying ways throughout time. So what's going on now? Well, we're throwing 2022 at it unsuccessfully because we don't have the scientific principles to figure it out. So
Mm-hmm.
it leaves us in a quandary, talking about it, speculating about it, because we know there's something more. We know that gut feeling, maybe that we know that higher self is
Mm-hmm.
telling us something. I just know the sense of knowingness, like the animal in the jungle without detecting the predator, without using the normal physical senses, knows
Yeah.
danger lies ahead. That's well established. There's that other sense not that we may have, not necessary because we evolved. It's not like we're in a prey predator situation in the jungle
Mm-hmm.
anymore. So it's still there, though. Point is, maybe
Is that,
that's still active in some way.
so that knowing is that our sixth sense?
Could be. Could be. At the point, don't ignore it. Some people have it more further developed than others. It's a
Right.
very distinct possibility. We often suppress it because it's not cultivated. It's simply not taught.
Does
Uh,
your study into all of this, does it give you comfort at all?
both comfort and frustration.
Mm-hmm.
It provides me with what I'm doing a documentary now with Dave Beatty of Dreamtime Entertainment. I wouldn't have been doing it unless I got involved in this genre.
True.
Consciousness
Yeah.
connection. People interested, go to consciousnessfilm.info for information about the film, who's in it. You have leading experts, um, as you know, um, in it. And it gives me comfort because I'm doing things that are a little proactive, things I want to do, spread the
Mm-hmm.
word. I wrote a book on St. Forces, Integration of Science, Reality, and You. That gave me comfort, but frustration too, because I don't have the answers. People will come to me with questions about, I had that experience, this experience, I saw that being, I had this dream, I had this hypnagogic experience, I saw that ghost, UFO.
Mm-hmm.
I get it all. You do too. But as if I had the answer, don't you see? I don't
But
have
do you
the
have
answer.
little breadcrumbs?
I had breadcrumbs, and that's a
Yeah.
good way to put it, because
Mm-hmm.
we're given breadcrumbs. That's exactly what we're given.
Yeah.
Whoever's calling the shots, who's ever doing this,
Right.
is leaving us the breadcrumbs, and we evolve off it. We utilize that as a foundation, and we move
Mm-hmm.
on. Maybe they gave you Roswell. Maybe they gave you the Phoenix Lights. Maybe they gave you the
Mm-hmm.
Belgian Wave, etc., etc., etc. Maybe we're
Right.
talking about thousands of different phenomena occurring simultaneously. That's
Mm-hmm.
multiverse in nature. If you want to go
Right.
to quantum mechanics, you could start confusing yourself to no end. Mathematically derived physical, theoretical physics like principles that are starting to take the forefront in terms of
Yeah.
explaining a lot of this. It's highly controversial. Not that it has the answers, but certainly it does ascribe to a lot of the phenomena we are experiencing as human beings
Mm-hmm.
than Newtonian physics. It wasn't designed to do that. So
Do you think that contact with these non-human consciousness entities are coming from another dimension?
Well, they like to lead us to believe just that. The fact that they wink out, wink in, teleport
Hmm.
us through physical objects. So people claim. So
I was
people
gonna say,
claim. Never
do you
happened to
believe?
me.
I was gonna say,
That
do you believe
suggested.
it, or do
Well,
you?
when more well balanced people than I tell me that a great touch, unlike Michael J. Carter, like
Hmm.
many other people,
Sure. Kathleen
more
Martin.
well balanced than I. People are coming out of the closet now more than ever, saying these
True.
kinds of
Yeah.
similar stories. Conscious recall, not hitting the guy, getting that dream state. Conscious
Hmm.
recall. Things that valet said a long time ago. John Mack, a handful. Grant Cameron now in the bandwagon. You get it. There's some truth there. Not everything is. There could be tricksters involved. It gets so extraordinarily complex, this phenomena. But it is a physical and non-physical. You're sticking that neck on the line, you say that. But you see, it's comforting and know I'm contributing in some way
Hmm.
with some
But
discussion
why?
with
Why?
people like you. But
Yeah.
it's frustrating too because I don't have the answers, and I was trained that way my whole life. To,
Well,
to,
the question, I guess, is why is it important to you to be doing this? Because if let's say, you're not 100%, I call myself
why?
in many cases a believer, right? I don't know for a fact, I can't prove it to you, but I
It's
believe.
important
Yeah.
because I saw two orange orbs in the night sky in Sedona, Arizona. So I wrote the book UFO Phenomenon, Should I Believe? Then I had a shared death experience. That's why it's important.
You had
My
a what? A
colleague
what?
told me I
A what?
died.
I'm sorry,
It,
Bob. What
it,
was that again? What you had? What kind
I
of
had a shared
experience?
death experience.
Got
Shared
it.
death.
Okay. Hmm.
Yeah, I was suffocating. I experienced death. It was during a lucid dream, but I woke up
Hmm.
knowing that sense of
Yeah.
knowing my colleague had died. She did that morning. At that time, I had the dream. That's why it got my attention. That's why it's
Hmm.
important to me. If I didn't experience it, I'd still be interested in it, but not to the level of the nth degree as I am now.
Yeah.
Exponentially speaking, my gosh, too much so. You see, where if you get too much, and then need a
Yeah.
vacation. You go to, I hate to use that proverbial
Yes.
going down the rabbit hole. I mean,
Yeah.
how many times are we going to hear somebody saying that? I just use it again,
Hmm.
but it's true, never ending.
Well, I'd
Down
like
in
to say that
China by
there's.
now.
Yeah.
It's just Richard Dreyfuss doing the mashed
Right.
potatoes in
Right. Right.
Close
Right. Yeah.
Encounters.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple rabbit holes. That's the thing, because there isn't just one rabbit hole. I mean, maybe there is. We just don't have the answer yet. Um, but yeah, I like taking those slides, down these little trips of speculation. But more than just entertaining the possibility of ideas, I think that most people do want some evidence, at least to substantiate their conviction.
Well, yeah, and then there's some people in nuts and bolts crowd say that we do have physical craft that's been retrofitted. It's just being held in some secret hangar somewhere. We all know
Mm-hmm.
that. But at the same time, the nuts and bolts crowd, if I hate to kind of divide things, but there's a lot of that. I'm on both sides of the camp. I respect them and the non-physical, the valet types. So
Mm-hmm.
look at both sides of the equation. Alan Hynek types, John Mack types, you.
Yeah.
Um, there's I say to them, okay, they say to us, where's the evidence that people are being abducted? Where's the evidence people are being contacted? They say they're getting two-way telepathic communication,
Mm-hmm.
and messages of one, of love, of deceased beings, of God, of time-space distortion. The common messages they receive. Um, what's that all about? Where's the evidence? Well, it's evidence. It's anecdotal. It's just subjective.
Mm-hmm.
What do you expect? Okay, how's this? You want to get into an argument? I don't want to argue about it, but I get that. So
Yeah.
I will say to them, like, where's your evidence? That where's a flying saucer on the White House lawn? Where's a hard, oh, we have
Mm-hmm.
evidence where? Well, it's in a document, MJ12 or some
Mm-hmm.
1952 out of Canada, in some, you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Historic. It's third hand, fourth hand. You don't know the authenticity. We've been burned many times. I'm not
Hmm.
a authoritarian on that, all that his history stuff. I'm familiar with a lot of it, yeah. But I can't get boggled down in the retrospective. We got to look forward. And
Hmm.
that's the frustrating part. There's too much of that historical analysis. We need it. It is important, very important. We have to continue to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we need more proactive integrating physical and non-physical.
What kind of equipment do we need to develop in order to study this better?
Um, a, a biosensor, something that can simultaneously measure a physical signature and at the same time note a reactionary response that is time locked to sending a message to it. You see, so you have both signatures occurring simultaneously. If you could develop something like that, I think that would be a big asset. To my knowledge, we don't. We have heat signatures. The Carolyn Core, well, they
Caroline
talk
Corey.
about,
Hmm.
yeah, they talk about the the hole in the sky, off west coast of San Diego, in
Hmm.
San Clemente Island, the portal. I don't quote me on the temperature, but I know Gary Voorhees, a few of them,
Hmm.
minus 60 degrees. They get RF frequency waves at certain frequencies. They get the point is to get physical information, uh, but people contend they also get non-physical information. Um, and maybe there are some biosensing devices that can get both. Like they threw Ingo Swan at it, supposedly other remote viewers at it,
I see. Okay.
uh,
Yeah.
and it didn't make much sense to them. They operate at a different level of consciousness, apparently.
Right. When you say biosensing, are you saying that pilots, jet pilots, airplane pilots should have biosensing sensors on their bodies while
Oh no,
they're?
not
Oh.
no no. Let me elaborate, please. I'm saying we should have devices that are possibly can send out a signal,
Hmm.
maybe a stroboscopic visual signal
Okay.
of some type, or an acoustic kind of signal of some type, or combination thereof,
Hmm.
variation patterns thereof that can elicit a corresponding similar type of response from a UFO,
Okay.
an
Yeah.
orb or a craft. And attempts have been made, of course, to do that with some degree of success. But to establish a language system, if at all possible, which is probably asking more than we might think,
Hmm.
along the line of that movie. I can't recall the name of it. Signs, where the foreign being was imprinting symbols on a window, and the person
Oh.
was trying
Oh.
to
Arrival.
image arrival.
Yeah, it's a great
Maybe,
movie.
maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, there's some truth to some of the stuff we see there in
Hmm.
CinemaScope, right? And you'd be surprised, and I'm sure creative things have been done, have been applied. Can look in the latest reports by DoD that
Hmm.
they acknowledge that there have been human interface experiments that have taken place, word for word. What do you think they mean? Human interface? They talk
There's
about
been.
remote viewing, psychic stuff. They're not going to elaborate, but they do mention it.
Yeah.
These are the small D. They're saying a few things that they're being honest about it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
because they can't hide it, we know it's true. There's enough expert witnesses and
Hmm.
documentation to support that. But they'll go no further to give you details. And
Yeah.
that's the problem. See, that's a
It's.
frustrating part of it, of course. That's why I try not to get overly involved with that because
Hmm.
it's a losing battle. Stanton Friedman and Alan Hynek, they turn you over to the grave saying, "I told you so." They'll spoon feed you a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll give you a little bit more, but they're in control. And it'll be another 100 years. You'll get another blue book, but it'll be a little bit more advanced, maybe a little bit more revealing. Unless this something around the corner that knocks you for a loop. You just never ever know. And if you listen to Lou Elizondo, you tend to think there is something
Yeah.
not that far off on the horizon that's really going to get our attention. You never know. Or Avi Loeb and
Hmm.
more and more. You know, it
Well,
comes out of left field, these things.
exactly. Yeah, you can't. Whoever they are in the government or military, they can't predict everything. They can't anticipate everything. So if you do have someone who, rogue, for lack of a better word, that defies your conventional expectations, and it surprises all of us. Someone like an Avi Loeb or Michio Kaku, for that matter. I think we're seeing a
Yeah.
lot of exciting, uh, independent of the government institutions developing now, or not institutions, but nonprofits, whatever you want to call them, working towards getting answers, and in a way where they can actually get some amount of publicity, because there is a certain amount of legitimization of the UAP versus the UFO, or what have you.
Oh, without question, and that's the biggest benefit of recent events, geopolitically speaking, in the arena of UFOs, thanks to 2017 work of Dave Beatty, etc. Social media, of course, many things. And that's evolution. But science had to catch up with that. People becoming
Mm-hmm.
more aware and awake, but science still can't be applied to explain it. So that's a frustrating part. And in a way, why do I care? Well, my wife is, she gets it. She knows there's something there, but she's neutral on it. She doesn't have the passion. The cork's not out of the bottle,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not her fault. So she'll say, "Why does it matter? Why is it so important to you?" And I look at her just like you said that a while ago. Why is it important to so many millions? Well, their experiences, as you mentioned, or they don't have to be. There's just something there that they know to be true, and the answer to life, and maybe even life after death, um, and what it's all about. It exists not that far away. And UAPs may represent a little bit of a Walmart of the paranormal, where we can take advantage of it and gain access to certain aspects of the paranormal, because so
Right.
many other
Yeah.
paranormal behaviors are associated with the UAP. We don't even have a good definition for paranormal. Something that's not related.
It's broad. Yeah.
It's very broad,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Something that can't be explainable by scientific principles, of course, and we see that galore in all manifestations. So we can spend the show on that, of course. Um, so the UFO itself is paranormal, and it's associated with other paranormal, like
Mm-hmm.
electrical interference in the house of people who have orb sightings, or as precursors to UAP events in their backyard, for instance, when they see a structured craft. It could be up to a mile wide, or it's a little pink blue orb in their bedroom, to a
Mm-hmm.
gray, to a reptilian, to a dead, carved out cattle, to a crop circle, on and on and on. Don't you see? And it gets so distorted, but it comes from legitimate sources. And then you get Skinwalker here. Could these guys be actually, BSing us in terms of what's going on there? I know people who've been at Skinwalker,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they're amazed at the negative effects that some people get. Now, and
And
I
it's
consider that a
generational.
good source. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to mention it, but it's a good source. What am I supposed to do with that?
Right.
What that alone, if that could be documented, proven,
Mm-hmm.
seems to be. These those who experience it, that's more important than, I don't know. That should be on the 6 o'clock news.
Well, it's like if you're walking in the woods and you see a bear. You tell somebody about it later, and they say, "Prove it." Unless you were able to capture it on camera, but it doesn't mean it wasn't real for you. And so we have to have a certain amount of faith and belief that what people are reporting is true, right?
Yeah, and then you could get into Bigfoot. It's kind of related in a way. Sometimes seen certainly with UAPs. Um, it become a craze, real popular. Squatchy, scratch. I don't know much about it. What do they call them? What are you doing tonight? I'm going squatching.
Squatching.
Squatching. Yeah,
Yeah.
all right, that sounds cool. Um, but I know a physical anthropologist, leading
Hmm.
physical anthropologist, State University of New York, that says it's impossible for there to be a Bigfoot. But he doesn't mean he's right because he's a
Hmm.
PhD physical anthropologist. He could be wrong, of course, but he gives you a rationale for why we haven't captured one, and that makes no
Hmm.
sense to him
Yeah.
for reasons that are in that discipline.
But see that's why
Yet
so
people
many
keep
people.
saying that they see it.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I mean,
You're left with only one other conclusion, that there must be some paranormal uh, element to this
exactly.
thing, whatever it is. Now, so I've had guests that tell that's basically a cop out, right? It's like I can't prove to you it's there, so suddenly, boom, it's supernatural, and then I can just explain away everything. And I understand that point of view, but we got there because people keep seeing something, and we can't explain why we can't capture it on camera or what have you. Um,
Well,
yeah.
that's the basis of the documentary consciousness connection. You do it in your documentaries in a way. There is an unseen force. Call it whatever you want, but it manifests. Some people interact with it. Some don't even want to go there because they heebie-jeebies and avoid it like the plague. It's interesting why they fear it. It's almost as if acknowledging that it is real, and
Mm.
fear is an
Isn't
outcome
that
of it.
interesting? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm more accepting. If I had a ghost come in my office here, it would more than get my attention, but I would say to it, if I would sense any hostility, I would get just as angry. I say it easily now as can be.
Sure, sure.
I see why some people flip out at these things, saying, "Don't give into it," and they go away, or read
Mm-hmm.
something religious and they go away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as opposed to feeling fear, which they seem to feed off of. The evil ones, at least, not all of them are. Um, but it happens more frequently than not. It's awkward talking about it, but people, like you say, are experiencing it as real to them, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what reality is. It's not what you
Right.
think; it's what I think.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I got to go to bed at night, and I got to take my medicine in the day, and I got to go to work, and I got to go. It's my reality.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, science doesn't look at the science of the subjective. That's not accepted, and
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
ignored in our scientific principles. That's why we need that paradigm shift
Isn't that
to
ironic
incorporate
though?
the subjective experience,
Yeah.
but it's poorly understood. And that's where the documentary is coming from. We need this paradigm shift to go from Newtonian to some integration of Newtonian with quantum mechanics. And that's 100 years down the road. In the meantime, we'll get little crumbs
Mm-hmm.
to make more sense of and evolve spiritually and our
Can you
understanding.
break down the double split experiment? Because I think that applies to what you were talking about here, because that implies a certain amount of subjectivity built into the nature of reality.
Yeah, well, the saying, well, it goes like this: everything exists as a particle until you look at it, until it's observed, and it becomes a wave.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the question is, why does mental intention alter physical reality? Well, we see parallels with psychokinesis, with mental intention affecting laser interferometers, where mental intention can affect the pH of water. We
Mm-hmm.
see analogies of it in psychokinetics, subtle effects, but they're real. Um, and so I forget the question,
Well,
but
if
nevertheless,
scientists accept that the double split experiment
Oh, yeah.
is real, it's been, a fact, then how do they deny subjective science?
Well, they consider it spooky action at a distance, which we know Einstein referred to it as. He noted the observer effect, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, he later admitted it to be real, although he had difficulty accepting it initially and then embraced it because it was too woo at the time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but but we see good evidence of experiencers who initially were scientific left brain minded. They have wild experiences or peak experiences and they flip, as Jeffrey Kreiper will say. They flip and become believers and they change their focus in science to incorporate the more spiritual. So Thomas Edison tries to make a phone to connect with the dead, to communicate with the dead, which Gary Schwartz is doing at University of Arizona, by the way. Um, but um, The double slit experiment, yeah, mental observation can affect the physical reality, more complex than that, with interfering
Mm-hmm.
patterns and how particles and waves go through different openings
Mm-hmm.
in space time and how they interfere and interact with each other, creating another alternating
Right. Mm-hmm.
waveform, an interference pattern. And the question is such a thing happen now
Mm-hmm.
in the form of simulation virtual reality? That's another issue we'll address at maybe some other point.
But that's a good question, because if that, well, it is true apparently that observation can affect particles, then is that evidence that we are in some kind of simulation?
It depends who you ask. You know, when you mentioned Mikio Kaku earlier,
Mm-hmm.
I heard him speak on radio not that long ago, and he's of the opinion that it's possible that the orbs that we see, the UFOs, or at least some of them,
Mm-hmm.
are the consciousness projected by other beings from light years away. That they
Wow.
appear to us as quantum amplifiers, for lack of a better term, or UAPs of
Huh.
some type. Um, uh,
That's interesting.
it is interesting. It's strange, though, isn't it? You know,
It's like, yeah.
yeah, maybe it is, and maybe it gets some credibility. But we think of it too in terms of uploading consciousness into physical systems,
Mm-hmm.
artificial intelligence. You know, we're on that road. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And maybe in more advanced civilizations are further on the road and are able to upload their consciousness via AI and transmit it in some kind of light sail, a
Right.
la
It could be
Avi
both.
Loeb.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe.
and also there isn't probably. I'm assuming there's not just one other intelligent uh,
Mm.
being out there, or civilization. If there's us and one other, then there's probably a handful more. I would guess.
Well, you know what's scary? You talk to Rudy Shield, an astrophysicist at Harvard,
Mm-hmm.
uh, a friend of mine, and we talked a little bit about this and how many life forms are there in the
Mm-hmm.
universe. So he gives us some crazy, exotic, long number, of course, of habitable Goldilocks planets,
Yeah.
Goldilocks zone, and the habitable planets. And then he says, you know, Bob, the real truth is it's something like 10 to the negative 22 universes. Universes. That 10 with 22 zeros after it. Universe. It's
Yeah.
almost as
Yeah.
if the real reality is like the number of bubbles in a bathtub, you know, with a lot of soap.
That's a lot of reality.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, that's where they go. These physicists,
Mm-hmm.
theoretical physicists, and just because they're at Harvard doesn't mean they have the answer. You know, am
Right.
I supposed to
Right.
believe that? What you, know, you can mention somebody, so what? I still got to pay my bills in the morning. whether it's true or not. Uh, but it does make you
It's not a
think.
bad. It's not a bad way to pay the bills. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I guess you could compare that kind of theoretical physics, quantum physics, to paranormal speculation, because oftentimes people in these fields, they look at what science is doing, look at what studies have been done, what the math says, and says maybe this is possible. And it seems to me they're doing it just with more credentials, and with some actual case studies and mathematical equations to potentially back them up. But
Sure.
it's not that far apart, is it?
No, it's not. And kind of along those lines, more people are coming out looking at these complex theoretical physics, mathematics, of course,
Mm-hmm.
applying new concepts from the Hadron Collider, Webb telescope eventually. We're all awaiting the latest pictures from that, of course, breathtaking. Eventually will be. But people like Gary Nolan, who's in a documentary too, for instance, a geneticist immunologist who's looking at the corday-Puterman area, the hippocampus in the brain,
Mm-hmm.
where he sees heightened connectivity of white matter, meaning it's more mature. A certain
Right.
area of the brain, there's just a lot more stuff going on here. More mature, more myelin, more nerve tissue. In
Mm-hmm.
those who are experiencers and those who are psychic. And he talks about this. You've heard him talk.
Doesn't that beg the question of what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But he said to me, it runs in families. And we know that.
Mm.
Abductees, contactees, it does run in families. So even in experiences with the paranormal runs in
Sure. Yeah.
families. And is it physiologic based? Or or does a brain change in
Mm-hmm.
response to paranormal activity from early in childhood?
I,
Um,
I would think a parallel comparison would be if you start learning a new language, if you start learning an instrument, certain parts of your brain grow, connections are made, right?
well, that's the
So
point.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we should cultivate human potential, which may extend way beyond we give credit to,
Mm-hmm.
in the form of ESP, for instance, mental intention. And we see evidence in autistic savants, for instance, of 4-year-olds who can speak 6 different languages or have ESP. 6-year-olds have ESP. It's been
Mm-hmm.
demonstrated
Yeah.
quite often. Um, and mathematical formulas, what's the cube root of 5,427? They give you the answer in 2 seconds. It's as wild as UAP descending from low space
Yeah.
altitude of 80,000 feet down to 20, back up to
Mm-hmm.
60, down to 50 in less than 0.7 seconds. Calculate the miles per hour on that one. Holy
Yeah.
mackerel!
Yeah. It's a phenomena for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just as crazy as a kid that can access information,
Yeah.
obviously beyond their ability. Now, yeah, well, how do I know that? Well, Diane Hennessy Powell told me. She's a neuropsychiatrist who I have great respect for. Not that she's right, but she wrote a book, ESP Enigma. I encourage people to read it. She gets it, doing leading research. And she's not alone with
Mm-hmm.
autistic savants, children. And we see this Rain Man, as one example of an adult who
Right.
has
Yeah.
unique abilities. We know that. But it goes beyond that. And the question is, can all humans demonstrate these kinds of abilities to our advantage, human potential?
Mm-hmm.
Certainly in the area of health, um, prevention, treatment.
Well, you have accidents where all of a sudden, after this accident, somebody can play the piano, like a concert pianist, right? Science doesn't really have a way to explain this other than maybe the mind subconsciously picked up, how to play the piano, and then it was brought forth, to the prefrontal cortex. I don't know. if that's even a leading theory, if that even makes sense.
Yeah,
What do
we
you
don't
think?
even
Yeah.
know. Yeah, it's a good question because you do see evidence of that. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
aspects of brain function, like terminal lucidity. People can be
Mm-hmm.
in a coma for months, and then right before they die, they
Mm-hmm.
wake up and they carry on a conversation like they would always hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lucid as can be, right? And then they drop dead an hour or two or three later, or a day later. Um, so these altered states of consciousness are something that are quite perplexing, but it's true. It could be a glitch in the system. We don't understand much of the brain, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Cock in the head, anything is possible. People, you could die from a little, bang the wrong way. It's
Oh yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
uh,
scary.
but that's another story.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, but when you were growing up, what belief systems were instilled within you spiritually? Did you have parents that were atheists?
Um, my dad was religious, but organized religion was a thing. My mom wasn't. She was much more spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
She had a spiritual influence on me in my teenage years. She was very wise, and so empathy was remarkable. So humane. These
Mm-hmm.
people that we know that are too good, that's easy
And
to
how?
take advantage of them. Right? How do
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
get to be like that?
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
They seek to do a good thing for somebody else every day.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
they live for. Too few in number, right? But why can't everybody be like that, right? That would be
It'd be awesome.
the
We need a better
answer,
world.
right?
Yeah.
A little
Well,
bit better. The ego
this
dissolution is what we need. Yeah, yeah,
yes, ego dissolution. I'm still working on that some days. Especially, I think our egos will flare up when life challenges us, right? Because
yeah.
there's a certain survival mechanism that it's designed for, and then sometimes for some people it just dominates them, and other people it's like it's not even an issue. It's a really amazing spectrum. Um, in this documentary, you know, do you walk away with the thought that you know there's a purpose behind all of this? Meaning, can we just be happy? Do we have to ask these questions? Can we just go along as a race and not ask the
No,
metaphysical
yeah, yeah.
ontological
Perfect
inquiries?
question. Perfect question. Uh, because Plato asked the same darn questions. They all did, as we do now. Different suit, same brain.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like we're
Uh,
compelled to do it.
Yeah, and that's why some neuroscientists are in the field of neurotheology, trying to find that God neuron, as I mentioned earlier, as
Mm-hmm.
if we have that instinctual nature about us to be
Yeah,
truth
yeah.
seekers, or to believe in a God, a supreme being. Is that built in? You know,
That's the question.
it's like
Yeah.
for people who do LSD. There was a study at Johns Hopkins, something like, I forget the exact numbers, like 100 people, something like 50, 60% of the 100 people who were
Mm-hmm.
atheists before they took psilocybin. Um,
I love
you know
that.
where I'm going?
Yeah,
They became believers in a supreme being.
it's crazy.
We may have mentioned that
Yeah,
before. Yeah.
yeah,
David Luke, but we need more studies like that. Thematic
yeah.
approaches. We need that with abductees, contactees, etc.
Sure. Yeah.
Thematic approaches that they've done with uh, psychedelic drugs. And it's like 100% of the time they encounter non-human
Mm-hmm.
entities. Uh,
Yeah,
it's remarkable, the research that they're coming up with, the findings.
yeah. I remember Timothy Lear and what was Ram Dass's uh, given name? I can't remember, but they were both
Yeah.
professors at Harvard. Um, their early studies showed that people who had these psychedelic experiences reported that it was the most spiritual experience they've ever had, um, whether religious or not. And it, you're still kind of left with that question of, is that just something that's stimulated in the brain. But I've had an experience before, and I know others have, where they've had a shared psychedelic experience, and two or more people are seeing the same thing that no one else can see. That's a very bizarre effect of psychedelics.
Not only that, that is rare, but it has been documented. But the same thing applies, correct me if I'm wrong, to UAPs, where two people will see one thing and two other people don't see the same
Yes,
craft.
true.
So very selective for some reason. Who knows if it's the same mechanism that's going on at play here.
Yeah,
Anyway.
well, let's leave it at that, Bob. We're at the end of the hour. That went by fast. Thanks so much for hanging out tonight.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm
All right, and if you
pulling
want
out
to find,
here, but thank you.
no, not at all. If you want to find out more about Dr. Robert Davis, go to bobspeaks.com. I put the link in the comment section. He is the author of Unseen Forces, The Integration of Science, Reality, and You, as well as you have one other book, right, Bob?
Life After Death, Analysis of the Evidence, and the first book I wrote was The UFO Phenomenon, Should I Believe In? And ConsciousnessFilm.info, a new documentary with Dave Beatty. Go to that, you'll read all about what we're doing, all the experts we have, and whatever you could do to support, that'd be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Yeah,
Great to be with you.
What's that website again, Bob, if people want to support the documentary?
ConsciousnessFilm.info, ConsciousnessFilm.info.
Okay, ConsciousnessFilm.info. Bob, have a good night, brother. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
All right.
Be well.
And thank you all for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. As always, tonight is one of those rare 1 hour nights. So it feels a little bit more like we're chilling in a lounge. So thank you for chilling with me. If you are a fan of this channel and the guests that we have, please subscribe, comment down below, like, and share. And if you ever have feedback of your own, not during the live show, you can comment down below, or you can email me at alan@paranormalnow.net. And so some really exciting news is I'm this close, just a smidgen away from finishing the Half-Light documentary, which has been eating up a ton of my time. So I will have something for you very soon. I'm excited to share that. But it also explains why I haven't been doing Coffee and UFOs quite as much, because I've really needed to focus on finishing this up. So anyway, to all of you out there, thank you so much. As always, peace and love, and live in the mystery.